we'll start with our star, Kim Adamson, reviewing the means of finance.
No, okay. Thank you, Chairman Bender. We're going to just review some of these illustrations of our cash applied projection based on various assumptions. And so in the recommended, or in the requested budget column, the first set of numbers, you're going to see that our current budget projections result in a cash applied number of $4,373,000. There are additional requests that have not been included in this projection that include the request for 6 new positions and 3 reclassifications at a total cost of about $400,000. There is the impact of adopting an accrual method of accounting for payroll with a one-time impact of $750,000. And then there are additional requests for funding from outside agencies for just over $352,000. Those requests, if they were granted in their entirety, would add $1.5 million to our budgeted appropriations. That would increase the required reserve by $75,000, and it would result in a new cash applied projection of $5,951,000. If we take the position that we're comfortable with budgeting our cash applied at 8% of appropriations, our target cash applied number is $5.4 million roughly, which means there's $500,000 too much built into these appropriations if all requests are granted. In illustration 1, you can see that we're changing some of the adjustments that would be authorized. And so, in effect, say we add just half of the positions requested, do the payroll accrual, grant half of the additional requests for funding by outside agencies, and trim some equipment costs, we would still increase appropriations by $1 million, but that would get us within $50,000 of our targeted cash applied. We'd still be slightly over by that $54,000 in this illustration. And then in the third illustration, if we backed off a little more as far in expenses, fill half the positions, do the payroll accrual, adjust our allocation to Carroll Institute for IVC housing, but don't give any funding increases to any other outside agencies. And we leave equipment requests as they were projected. We'd give everybody their equipment. We would be adding, sorry, my eyes are so bad. We're going to be adding about $600,000, $900,000, excuse me, to appropriations. And that will get us, that results in us being about $95,000 below that targeted cash applied number. So there's some flexibility in any of these illustrations, but it's just to give you an idea of what the impact would be on your decisions, based on your decisions. So maybe the first point of discussion is if everyone's comfortable with an 8% cash applied.
Questions about that? Concerns? Commissioner Penniga looks like there's a thought just waiting to come out, so I'm waiting.
Oh, but I don't want to stick my foot in my mouth first. Let me think about that for a second.
Okay.
We could go, if you'd like, we could go back and review that cash applied graphic where you can see where we've budgeted in previous years, if that would be helpful.
That would be great.
Okay, so that is on slide number 10 in your packet.
You don't have prior years to that. I mean, this goes back a few. I mean, how long have we been doing? 8? I mean.
I have that, I can get to that on my laptop. I can go look that up.
Just more perspective would be helpful, I think. Just based on this, I'm comfortable at 8%, but I don't know what it looked prior to 2016. That was before.
While Kim's doing that, because we have done that chart in a retrospective way, you see a complete different pattern during the early 2010s. Because at that point, there was more cash applied, I believe is a higher percentage, and we actually used that cash. So that is not where we want to go back to.
Back in the Great Recession.
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah.
Back in 2006 through 2011, we were budgeting at 10 to 12 to as high as 14.5%.
We've made a lot of changes.
We did dip into cash reserves in that year where we budgeted at 14%. We dipped into cash reserves at $1.5 million. The following year, we dipped into cash reserves by almost $3 million. We budgeted at 13.5%. And those are on much smaller appropriations numbers, 45 million, as opposed to the 66 million we're looking at here.
And my only thought would be kind of what I alluded to yesterday. I think 8% seems like reasonable in a reasonable time. I do still think that an argument could be made that we could bump that number up a little bit if we went ahead and budgeted for the accrual, since that's really going to be somewhat of a non-cash issue.
Impact.
Yeah, impact. So that, I'm not necessarily wed to that approach, but I could be convinced, or am kind of convinced, that bumping it up a few $100,000 could be done.
So that would be 8.5% cash applied if we did that?
If we increased it the full amount of the pay,
No, maybe
just
half of
half.
it, or just, yeah.
yeah.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Bard.
you know, in 8 years, I will not be a commissioner. But I have to come up with $750,000 to save them, people that are gonna sit here. Meanwhile, I voted to opt out more than once and giving those people millions of dollars that they get to spend 8 years from now. I'm really not that worried about the accrual. I mean, they're getting millions of dollars in opt-out that we approved. And I think the idea of maybe funding the accrual at a lower level here might work out, or not cutting our whole budget just to make that issue reasonable. We're passing along a good system here with plenty of opt-out latitude as they go forward.
Commissioner Heiberger.
I'm comfortable with that 8% because some of the cuts and changes that I've made, and granted, I've only just done a little bit, that I think that I might actually have money to put back into that. So I'm comfortable with the 8 moving forward right now, and as we get farther down the road, we'll have a better idea if we're using 8 or if we need a little more.
Thank you.
I think that we just need to move forward because some of our decisions are gonna reflect that dollar is, and I actually think I might have some money to throw back in there, so. I could be wrong, but I think I do.
Cindy is smart, I'm just complaining about the people in the future.
Commissioner Karski.
I'm on the same page as Commissioner Heiberger. I mean, right now, I think we gotta start somewhere. I think 8%'s a good number to start at, and, you know, when it comes, we've all done budgets for numerous different organizations, and when it all comes down to, that's just a budgeting tool to help us get to the bottom line. So I think at this point, 8%'s a good number to start at, and we can look at adjusting it if we absolutely have to.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay. I'm gonna jump back to, let's see. I'll jump back to the illustrations then. So these illustrations all do assume the 8% level, and so again, depending on what level of funding you choose to provide in any of these areas, or if there are other adjustments that you'd like to consider. We've talked about adjusting the ambulance funding a little bit. Any other considerations you would like to factor in, we could add those as well.
And as long as you mention ambulance, I will tell the commissioners that I was able to visit with Jason Gearman yesterday, and he was willing to undertake the task and confident that he thought he could get some recommendation back from the group of ambulance providers on a funding mechanism by the end of August. He thought that was certainly doable. So if we put some placeholder, I think was the term Commissioner Heiberger used yesterday, into the budget, then we could revisit that when we have a hearing after that.
That would be very good timing, because we have that hearing on the first Tuesday after Labor Day that's required, so.
Yeah, that's what we talked about, so he thought that was a doable timeframe. Okay, other questions about this slide? So the way the agenda is set up is that we were just gonna kind of walk through these different areas of requests and talk about them. I mean, it's certainly not set in stone if somebody had some other approach, but I think we might as well, we gotta talk about all these things, so we might as well just start marching through them, and then we can, circle back as we need to. So if we could, we're gonna start with the building fund. And that is in the presentation from yesterday. It's the other request. It's the 2021 preliminary budget other request. And the building fund is like 5 or 6 slides in. I think it's 5 and 6 maybe.
Okay,
Yeah.
here's the project list.
So for the 2021 proposed budget, are there any concerns or particular line items that anybody wants to visit about?
Madam Chair, I really feel like our building committee and our facilities director have things under control.
I would tend to agree. Anybody else have any other comments? Okay.
The one thing I did want to point out, because Gerald brought it up in the building committee this morning, we talked about the insurance proceeds, and this is where you'll see that we're projecting a net deficit, revenue versus expense in 2020 because of all the projects that were carried forward. But we do have these insurance proceeds in the building fund that add to our beginning cash, so we're projecting ending cash in the building fund of $2 million.
Great.
All right. Hearing no comments, we're going to kind of mark that off as that the building fund project list has our okay right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that takes us to staffing requests. This is usually where the rubber meets the road in this process. Commissioner Heiberger.
I'm going to start it off because of Aaron's presentation and just because of conversations I've had before and a little bit I've had with Aaron. I would like you to go to the grant positions and that
Page is
first.
this in our book, in our,
This is in Carrie Deaver's presentation.
Yep, in Carrie Devers, and it's the grant positions. Those currently are all in our budget right now.
So it's
Yes, they are.
personnel and staffing. is
And
what
so
you're-
I would suggest that the pretrial coordinator, for 34,750, that we put that one back, take that one out of the budget, because I'm fairly confident we will get money from MacArthur. And so, this is the one that we are funding with Lincoln County for a quarter. I'm a little worried about doing that. I mean, we may have to visit that later if it actually, no funding does come forward, but I think at this point, I think we could pull that 34 out. I'm very comfortable pulling out the caseworker from Human Services and the Alliance. The reason being is that Human Service, the Alliance program has recently had a caseworker resign or move on or whatever, and so they have an open position in that room or in that budget. So if MacArthur does not fund this position, that person will not lose their job. Carrie will just put that person into the caseworker position that she's going to have open. So they would lose a person in their office, but they would not lose the specific person. They would lose a position, but they wouldn't lose a person. So I would say then you could take that 63,071 out of the grant-funded position, so that puts both of those, which is, a little over $100,000 back, right at
I'm a little concerned, I'm confused about the pretrial because only half of that position is funded with the grant. So
Correct.
are you suggesting we still remove the position in its entirety? Then we would remove the revenue from Lincoln County for that
No, we
quarter
just
of a
fund it
position?
at the same level it's funded at this year.
Yeah.
So for budgeting purposes, all Minnehaha County is going to only budget the same amount for that position as they have budgeted this year. We did have some conversations after the presentation today, and the folks felt comfortable that that was a reasonable approach to take, particularly if we do accept responsibility for the corporal position in the jail, then we have a very good case to make to MacArthur that we are taking steps to embrace parts of this and take them under our wing, and that the argument can be made that these other positions still require some grant support. And so for right now, I'm also comfortable if we just leave the funding, we don't take the position away, but we leave the Minnehaha County funding at the same level it's at right now.
Okay,
If we funded the whole position and then the McCarthy grant came through, it would be supplanting to try to pull that funding back out. Does that make sense to you? Just say it's
yes.
still funded
Because
grant.
we are budgeting, we've got, we did build $350,000 of grant revenue built, that is built into our revenue projections, assuming we would be that we would be awarded that grant in 2021.
So that's into the revenue side now?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The assumption was made that that would continue.
Right.
And that's how these grant-funded positions would continue. So by leaving these positions in, I don't really think we
haven't done
we are
anything.
assuming they are being grant-funded.
Okay.
So if we take the
So
position out,
that-
we lose the money.
So then, so then we don't want to take anything out of this sheet, because if the grant goes away, all of these
This
people
is
go.
this is the
Confusion.
confusion, and that's why this was broken out as a separate slide this time, is because we have acquired a lot of grant-funded positions for good reasons, but they make accounting difficult and planning difficult.
Right.
And
So that being.
and so I think we need to visit with the folks who are really knowledgeable about those grants and work this out, because we want to make sure we don't misstep here. And if we only budget at the level that we know that we're paying right now, and we take the income out of the grant side, that's another way to tackle the problem.
Right. So what would happen is we would take the 350 out of the grant revenue. We would remove that revenue. Then we would also, there's $280,000 of non-payroll expenses budgeted for MacArthur grant. And then there are these grant-funded positions. So in combination, the grant-funded positions and the other expenses equal the 350.
So I have another-
Commissioner Heiberger.
So I have another question. I think I'm understanding. So then, when we're picking out positions we want to approve to come out of our general budget and not use it out of the grant position, we need to take that corporal position and put it over on the other page now.
There's no funding for the corporal position in revenue, is there?
No.
Well, it's a MacArthur grant.
So then we
mean-
need to move the corporal position
Corporal
over,
is the
because,
one that will be assumed into the general fund.
And there was no revenue to offset that.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So we gotta find a different way to report this stuff out then, so we know which,
yeah, because I was
which of these
confused.
positions on, the slide showing grant position review, which ones of those we are anticipating using general fund dollars? Or
Yes.
which one of these we're anticipating them being grant funded? Because some of them we do not, we pretty much know there's no funding for next year.
Right.
I thought there was.
No, like that sheriff's office patrol position, that COPS funding is gone.
Right.
So,
correct.
so we'd have to move both the corporal and the cops ones, or they aren't funded.
When you say move, we just put them on the other list
Right,
as if they're a new position.
yeah.
And the difference between those new positions and the other new positions are that those are already built into the payroll projection.
I'm
Does
confused.
that make sense?
So
These
there-
positions are already in the payroll projection that resulted in the $4.3 million cash applied.
There's also the grant funding is also figured into the
That's
revenue
correct.
site. So
That's
it
right.
doesn't,
Commissioner Karski.
But two of them, the sheriff's office, the corporal and the investigator position or patrol position, don't have funding with them, but you built them into
That
the
is-
assumption.
That's right.
So if you take them out, you just remove that part from the assumption and move them to the other side of the equation where we figure,
Right,
okay.
and it won't change any of our numbers.
Yeah.
It wouldn't change any of our numbers.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Barth.
you know, every time we take a grant to hire somebody, you know that it's going to run out, and we really have often just made that person a permanent employee. I certainly feel that way about the corporal and the investigator. I feel we should keep these grant-funded positions, and if we transfer them over to the other side, fine. I'm looking with a more jaded eye at the new requests that are on the next page.
Yeah, and Commissioner
Agreed.
Heiberger.
I apologize, I'm still a little confused. I don't want the corporal position and the cops one to go away. So.
Right.
I don't know, I don't understand if there is revenue available, or if we have to figure that out of the 200,000, because so there's already money for them on the other side, which isn't grant money.
That's right.
Okay.
We assumed we were using just general fund dollars to
Okay.
pay for continuing those positions.
All of these positions?
Those two.
No.
Out of separate pockets.
Yeah, see, that's where the confusion
where
is
it-
that they're not apples and oranges
Right.
necessarily.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to know which ones we have paid for and which ones we haven't, so,
If I could,
yeah.
this is exactly why this section was created for you. What's unusual about this year is that all your grant funding ends in 2020. When you see this in the future, some of them are going to say 2021 or 2022, whenever we know the grant ends. The notes column gives you an idea of where your funding is at.
Right.
The sheriff's office submitted new position requests with their budget materials, making it clear that the grant ends and there's no opportunity for continuing the grant funding. The other ones, we don't really have much materials on, but they're saying, we hope that there's gonna be grant funding for it, which is why it was built in on the revenue side.
Okay.
And because of what has historically been the past, typically we have continued grant funding positions, which is why it was built into the payroll. But because the COPS grant ends, there's no revenue to offset that. For the other ones, we were told there would be revenue to offset it, and that's why it was built in on the revenue side. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, I think, you know, maybe next year we just do one slide with two parts or something. The top part shows those that we have revenue built in to offset the cost of that position, and then ones that we haven't built any revenue into that we know is just coming out of general fund. That might help me anyway. I don't know the rest of you.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused, so I apologize.
But I think at the end of the day, you know, the one issue that I'd really want to be careful about is that we visit again with the people who are working most closely with the MacArthur grant, because that's what the funding, and make sure that as we report out our budget, we don't inadvertently affect the ability to get the funding that we have built into our budget as a revenue source.
Yeah.
So that we don't somehow step in a supplanting issue inadvertently.
I absolutely agree, because the positions that have resulted from MacArthur grant, that has transitioned since the time that grant was awarded to where we are today. And so it is kind of a changing environment. As time goes on, sometimes new positions are identified that we created, and we didn't always follow the original budget that was established when the grant was applied for. And we do have this other grant that the sheriff's office is pursuing for an adult diversion program, and that will have potentially positions tied to it as well. And it's a complicated area to keep track of.
And we appreciate your help helping us keep our eye on the ball. So Commissioner Karski and then Commissioner
You know, I
Heiberger.
guess, excuse me, comes down to the philosophical position of, if we receive grant funding, as Commissioner Barr said, are we gonna continue these people beyond the grant? I mean, if it's a patrol person that the cops grant funded for 2 or 3 years, you know, and now the grant's gone, do we keep that or not, or do we look at each one of them on an individual basis? And that's the bridge we're at right now.
Madam Chair, I wonder if we could ask Joe to comment on these two positions, which are, basically related to the Sheriff's Department, the corporal position and the investigator position.
Is that okay? And then we'll do your question
Yeah,
afterwards. Okay.
no, that's fine.
Good morning. Thanks for
Hey,
being here.
yes, no problem. Good morning, thank you. So as it was mentioned, those two positions for the sheriff's office, it is clear at this, we will not be getting funding after 2020 for these positions. So that's why they were submitted as potentially a new hire request. The individuals that are currently in those positions that are funded, if for some reason these positions would go away, we probably wouldn't eliminate that specific person that's been working with us for this many years. We would probably just remove the next vacant spot that comes open through either a retirement or a separation of that sort. But we really do see the importance of these individuals and the progress and the steps that they have taken through the implementation of these grants and the services that they've provided. The corporal position, I think as Michelle Boyd has mentioned, was something that was planned with the jail opening, with the expansion of all the services that are going to be offered at the jail. The MacArthur grant just allowed us to start it a little bit sooner, and that is why now the MacArthur grant has kind of evolved into something else, and we were ready to transition the corporal into the jail budget.
So are they needed?
Yes.
Yes.
Of
Yes.
course.
Yes, of course they are.
The other position is the position that they talked about yesterday a little bit that serves on the drug task force. And personally, I don't know that this is the time we want to cut back resources to a drug task force. So,
Other agencies have really increased their contributions, and in the sheriff's office, we've been fairly stagnant for many, many years with one investigator, even though we've seen a growth in drug crimes, unfortunately, in the area. Not only, like I said, the lower end users, but some of the larger seizures and big movements of drugs as well. And so having two investigators allows for maybe one investigator to focus more on those big seizures, which eat up a lot of time, but then we're not negating our investigation duties for the lower end stuff too.
any other questions for Captain?
I favor keeping both of these positions.
Commissioner Heiberger?
I do too, and I apologize for belaboring this. I still don't understand. So those positions, okay, so we're keeping both of those too. Are they general fund dollars, or are they still dependent on grant fund dollars, and we now had to put them into the $200,000? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm sorry.
Those are funded with general fund dollars.
Okay.
They would not create any kind of budgetary adjustment to
Okay.
keep those positions.
So the corporal is a yes, and the cops one is a yes. Thank you.
Okay.
I could have brought it to you.
And my
Don't hit
my
me.
assumptions would be that all your notes that show grant funding are in the revenue side of the budget.
That is correct.
Okay.
So if we eliminate any of these, we need to go offset that with some change to grant revenue, a reduction of grant revenue.
In theory, if you eliminate the position, you're losing money on the revenue side that would make it a net loss.
Right, we're not gonna free
Oh,
up any
okay.
cash here.
Okay,
One
okay.
way or the other, we're not freeing up any cash by that analysis,
Right.
so.
Perfectly, yep.
Never, that would
Okay.
perfect.
I think I finally understand.
Great, thank you.
Sorry.
I'm not sure I understand, so maybe somebody could repeat it back to me.
Yeah, I don't understand it.
Right now, we're gonna just leave the grant positions the way they are.
Yep.
And so now let's move on to the new positions that are requested for 2021. And I'm open for thoughts about that.
I just want to clarify, so the sheriff's office request for the drug investigator is not the same request for
No.
that grant-funded
The corporal that we
carryover.
met this morning.
Yeah.
Those are the two sheriff's office positions on that grant position review. They're two separate positions.
So, and then there's a third request for a drug investigator. Is that,
No, the third one
No.
is their operations system
Yeah.
corrections officer.
The drug investigator is the other grant-funded position.
it is?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Madam Chair, looking at the new positions, I don't want any of them except for the sheriff's office one possibly. I don't see, again, as we talked yesterday, the auditor has no election coming up. Sorry, Bob. The other offices, you know, as they expand, I don't really see that they need this urgently, and I think, let's see if we can get by.
Commissioner Karski.
I'm going to be a little different opinion on that. I see, I agree with the auditor position, the election position. I would be more in favor of the, for example, the public defender and the state's attorney's office requests for assistance, paralegals, that type of thing. I think we have too many of our highly compensated people doing that type of work, and that if we hired assistants and people that could get the legwork done, the non-technical portion of the work done, that we would we could justify not hiring additional attorneys at this point anyway, just give them the help that they need. So I would be in favor of the promotions that are requested, and for the public defender, the paralegal, and the state's attorney for a legal office assistant and a paralegal.
Commissioner Heiberger.
I'll throw mine in here. So I think we need to do the sheriff, jail operators. I want to throw out the treasurer's office, and my reason being is we have asked, she did ask that we would come down and observe her office, and so we worked with her, sat down and had a meeting with her, and Craig was going to go down and observe her office and get us started in that process so we could understand better the need for a tax and license person, and she has now decided that that was not necessary, and that she would only let each commissioner come down, and I don't think that that is the best avenue for that direction. The other thing is as we continue to suggest different types of technology and upgrades and stuff, she said that she is interested in staying where they've been for 50 years. And so I'm not ready to put a new tax and license person in there until there has been some thorough investigation of how we could come into the 21st century with some of those issues. And maybe we already have, but we are not aware of that. And so, but then the two legal office assistants, I'm going to throw this out as discussion point. I don't know that I'm sitting completely on this, but for the state's attorney's office legal assistants, although I agree with you, I also think we have a new state's attorney coming in, and maybe we need to give an opportunity to look at that office before we put another staff person in there. So that would be my comment about that. Otherwise, so it would be the sheriff one for the, or excuse me, the jail staff one, and the other ones I'm kind of in the air about. I do agree with the legal, if we're going to put legal people in those two offices, PDO and SAO, that they should just be the assistants and not a new attorney.
Okay. I don't know if you want to comment, Or if we should just start going down position by position. Sometimes that helps to coalesce people's thoughts. So, is there anybody who wants to speak in favor of the auditor election, senior election technician position at this point? I agree. I think we're premature there. There's no election next year. We're hoping to get some reports back from a task force on the last election. So I think we need more information for that position. And so what about the senior public defender attorney position in the public defender's office? Is there anybody who'd like to speak out in support of that?
That's the promotion, correct?
No.
No,
No.
it's a new position, a new
New
attorney
position.
position.
Oh, okay.
It's the $94,624 cost.
I don't favor it, is all I can say.
Okay. I mean, I would say, Carrie Deaver sent out some comparisons that I've used in the past to try to equalize the offices, and I would say that, right now, when you compare the state's attorney's office and the number of attorneys that they have that are dealing just with court matters, and then you compare the number of those attorneys to the number of attorneys that are in the public defender's office, the public advocate's office, and understanding that a number of those then also get out because of conflicts to other attorneys, I don't see the need for an attorney right now.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Along those lines, apparently we were actually missing a state's attorney for part of last year. And as we now have one with Crystal and we will have one with Dan, it seems to me like we're in effect adding a worker bee, hopefully, to the group now. And so that's encouraging.
Commissioner
An
Karski.
additional comment on the attorney for the public defender. They have two positions that are only going to be filled, I think, in August, September. Is that correct? Two open positions. So they have two positions that we funded last year that haven't even been filled yet. That'll be filled yet this fall or late summer. And then we talked yesterday about the trying to get some state assistance, financial assistance on our specialty courts, and let's see how that plays out. So I think right now with two attorneys coming on, and we're not, I think we're gonna be okay for this year. So I'm okay with not funding a new attorney position.
Okay. So I'm gonna take the two paralegal positions towards the end, because I think we'll have a little more debate about those. The sheriff's office, the jail correction systems operator, is there anybody who's opposed to that position? I didn't hear anybody.
Can't say no to the sheriff.
You'll be glad to
Can't
hear
say
that,
no to
doubt.
Joe, he's sitting back there.
Okay, and so then we have the treasurer's office. Is there anybody who would like to speak in favor of adding a position to the treasurer's office right now? I would have to echo Commissioner Heiberger's comments personally. Okay, so that takes us down to the two paralegal positions. So maybe the easier of the two is the public defender. Is there anybody who's opposed to adding the paralegal position to the public defender's office?
Madam Chair, I just
Oh, that's what you were. Sorry.
asking to, in the name of thrift, not to do it.
Okay.
Is there a comparative for the number of paralegals to the number of attorneys that the private practice uses?
I could address that, because I asked that question of Judge Heinrich's former judge, who's on the PDO board. I asked, what is the typical ratio of paralegals to attorneys, and he said he has two. We have 4 paralegals and 26 attorneys.
Yeah, I would say it depends a lot on the kind of practice, what kind of work the attorney does. But a lot of really good attorneys have more paralegals than attorneys, because if they can, it's just as Commissioner Karski said, it's a way of maximizing the person who is the higher dollar employee and allowing somebody else to help them be as efficient as possible. So I personally am in favor of adding a paralegal to the public defender's office. I think it's certainly a much lower cost way to help them be more effective and efficient. There is a lot of work that their office has to do to keep in contact with clients. And if you make attorneys do all that, you've spent a lot of money on really non-legal, what would be non-billable work in a private practice, so.
Mr. Hendricks commented, not this year, but one of the other years that I was on the public defender's office, that he said, you guys need more paralegals in that office, because he said, I'm having attorneys run me papers because they don't have enough paralegals to get the running legwork. He said, you're spending an awful lot of money for a runner, so.
Well, I can't say no to the county chairwoman.
To the two women.
Two women, there you go.
Chairwoman.
Yeah.
But chairwoman, I'm in trouble.
Okay. I mean, I'm not,
So put it in.
I would support the paralegal.
okay. So then that takes us, I think the only position left is the legal office assistant for the state's attorney's office. I am certainly open to leaving that off right now and giving the new state's attorney a little time to have some input into the process, with the idea that depending on how our funding changes. I mean, I know in visiting with him, he has some ideas and, pretty new to the budget process, but was here with us yesterday. So I'd be open to taking that position off right now, and with the idea that as we look to finalizing the budget, depending on where we are financially, we could consider his input.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on
Fine
that?
with that.
Yep.
For now.
No, they had two requests, a legal office assistant and a paralegal, correct?
No.
No, they only, I probably said paralegal, because sometimes I think of a good legal office assistant is,
Yeah.
in my mind, almost like a paralegal, but it's the legal office assistant is the position I'm talking about. They did not ask for a paralegal, so that was my bad.
I thought they did.
Yeah, here's this, I don't know if you can find it, but here's the slide 15.
Okay. I'm just looking at the
Oh,
request, the
the more
department new
detail.
position request that we had dated May 18th, 2020.
Do you know what he's referring to, Carrie?
I think you might have received some materials to prepare you for upcoming requests as well. So if you were looking for the new position request forms, yes, you would have seen additional materials, but the only request for 2021 is this one.
I think it was for 2022.
Thank you.
All right. So I think my notes, and Kim, you could tell me if you're tracking with me. My notes is that the only two positions that we are keeping out of the staffing requests are the position for the jail, sheriff's office, the correctional systems operator, and for the public defender's office for the paralegal.
Yes.
Right?
And Vicky's keeping tabs on those, so
All right.
get some updated numbers.
Okay.
So then it goes to the other staffing requests, which were the, basically reclassification of positions. Is there anybody that has any comments on those?
I would be in favor of just doing those as promotions.
Yep.
And we absorb those costs.
Okay. Anybody who is not in favor of all of those?
I just have a question.
Commissioner Bard.
So if you promote somebody, say from paralegal to paralegal supervisor, does that create another opening for a paralegal? Okay, no. Well, the other thing I worry about is that if you can't get people a raise, you give them a promotion and then they get a raise. And I would hate to see them try to bypass our regular system to give a special favor to somebody. And I'm not saying that's what's happening, but that would be a concern.
I think these positions have been reviewed through the job descriptions, and their promotion, if you will, is warranted, and we go ahead and do it. And frankly, you want to keep the good people that you can move up, so you don't have to go out and look for new ones, so I'm not too worried about that.
And I'm okay with that too. I just want to throw a little caution on the furnace of spending money.
And I appreciate that. And I mean, I would agree, because I've had an opportunity to visit with Carrie a little bit since I'm her liaison. And these have all been vetted through the process. They have provided the reason for them, for the promotion. And I would agree. I think I'm fine with them. But it is always, you know, anytime these positions get reclassified, they do need to be carefully looked at, so. All right, so those are approved. So,
Where are the equipment requests at?
yeah, I don't.
Oh, I found it.
Okay.
I found it.
I was looking for
I don't, do
mine,
you
too.
guys, are you interested in an update from Vicki as to where we are right now?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, not yet.
No, not yet? Okay.
Leave the room, Gerald.
I will.
We'll go through vehicles for Gerald before we look for
Yes.
any kind of update. All right, so vehicles, I think
Hey,
Kim is
Monty,
looking for the,
Can you help me?
Vehicles is the first page in the 2021 preliminary budget and other requests.
all right, so vehicles, does anybody have any vehicles they want to talk about?
Those impacting the general fund are listed at the top of the schedule, and then the highways below.
Because that's something different.
So there's $318,000 in equipment requested in the general fund, and $852,000 in the highway fund.
Commissioner Heiberger?
I have requests again. You know me, I jump on vehicles. So the equalization truck for $25,000, which is a 2003 Silverado. I would suggest we do not replace that. If you look at their maintenance schedule, it's all routine maintenance on there. I think it's, I can't remember the miles on it right now. Oh, I have it here, just a second. It's got, nope, it's not on there. So I don't know what I don't know what the miles are on it. But all of their work on it have been maintenance, oil changes. They've had an all brakes repair on it with a tie rod, which, you know, it's basically normal maintenance. They actually replaced a hubcap for $300. I just don't see any reason that we should buy a new vehicle at this point when there is no issues with it. I actually have a 2003 Chevy Silverado, and we use it hard, and it's a good truck. So I don't think it's necessary.
I was just going to interject
ahead.
that I have had the request for people to speak closer to the, to move the mics closer to you, because people are having a tough time hearing you out there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That has been my issue at home also.
Okay.
All right, so there's a request to remove the Silverado, the 2003 Chevy truck, from equalization.
I'll support that, removing it.
Knew more about the vehicle. I don't know what condition it's in.
Right here, he gives it to you. He submitted the paper in narratives. If you want to look under his narratives, that's in there. It does have the here's the mileage, 169. I think they can go another year in it. They're traveling Minnehaha County. They're not traveling other states.
And I also have a 2003 Chevy Silverado pickup, believe it or not, with 180-some thousand miles on it. And, yeah, I mean, the value of that vehicle might be right in that $4,000 range would be my guess. Yeah. I guess I see arguments to keep it, just based on the fact that, as you said, it's probably not going more than 30 miles from home. And if something happens, it can easily be recovered. So I'd be in favor of not replacing that one now.
I agree.
All right. So we'll take the equalization vehicle off. Any other comments, Commissioner Heiberger?
I'm gonna go to the next one, the human services transport vehicle. Really, they only need a used vehicle, so my suggestion would be that we sell them one of our caravans. The commission office has two older caravans. We sell them the older one. Their transportation is all within the city of Sioux Falls, and it's just to transport a client to an appointment. And then we consider putting a newer or a new commission office one. The commission office ones are used to go to Yankton or to other places when we're doing meetings, and it's not just our office that uses that vehicle. And so I have no idea what the book value is. I just said, if the book value is maybe $3,000 is what I'm guessing, Human Services would pay that $3,000, and then I think a van you can buy for, I don't know, $15,000 to $18,000. I don't know. I'm not buying vans these days, but another.
Explorers.
And so I don't know what they are.
Explorers that we currently have came from highway.
So I'm just saying, I think that we could probably find a fairly reasonably priced, even if we got a used one, if that's what it needs. I just think that it's a good way to do it and make that work.
Madam Chair. Carol, so we used to have a white van in the commission office. Did you crash it someplace?
I will tell you a story someday about 25 years ago. But yes, the white van ended up going to Safe Home. They took that over, and that was the vehicle that by the time they got done to it after a couple of years, it wasn't in the best shape. They had to go in reverse to go forward with the transmission, and the roof leaked onto the seat. So they've found another used vehicle to replace that lovely white vehicle that was drove very lovingly for many, many years here.
Would one of our Blazers actually suffice for human services? I like Cindy's idea.
Explorer.
So we're gonna take off the human services $15,000 vehicle. Are we adding another vehicle then?
So what you would do is you would have Human Services purchase one of the vehicles for us for the book price or whatever, and then yes, you would have to put a vehicle amount in for the commission office to replace the one that we sell to Human Services.
Kim?
So, I'm sorry, I was looking at that other cash applied analysis, but we can add, are you suggesting a used vehicle or a new vehicle? The sheriff's office is budgeting $34,000 for an SUV. What would
We
you
don't
think?
need an SUV,
Okay,
Highway's also at $35,000.
but we're not buying an SUV. We're just gonna buy like a caravan van. I think
Do you prefer not to replace, to have a van instead of an SUV? We use those SUVs a lot.
UV, okay, whatever.
It would cost $34,000 to get a new commission office vehicle. How many miles are on those vehicles, Craig? You drive them more than,
You know what, the one that I drive to Pier the most is the one I keep track of, that is around 150, another one's around 160, I think,
and they're what years, do you know?
2008.
So if we give the higher mileage one to the HS, I don't know what to tell you about buying the new vehicle. Somebody else with more knowledge on vehicles than me.
It's gonna cost us $35,000.
I think that's what we do. I think we just put it in at,
so we'll budget $35,000 in the commission office, and then we'll budget, well, we really don't have to budget anything for human services. We'll just do a transfer
Yeah.
of that asset between those two departments, no cost.
So 20,000.
And it may be fully depreciated, I
Okay.
don't know. Likely it is.
I just want to interject my private experience with other groups is that frankly, in those kinds of operations where you're just running people around town, you'd be better off doing a cab contract or a Lyft or some other contract, because I think it's inefficient use of staff time to drive people around town when they could be doing other more important things. And secondly, my unfortunate experience is seems like the work comp claims you get that are extremely expensive. So I'm not a big advocate of even doing transportation other than having someone contract with an outside agency rather than having a staff person who could be addressing client issues in the office or Zoom or wherever. So I'd throw that in there about not only the cost of the vehicle, but it's the operational cost of having someone out of the office. It's expensive.
Carol has a comment.
And you are correct, Commissioner Benninga, it is expensive on there. I think Carrie Benz would be the person to give you a full background on doing that at all. Many of the times, they're transporting them because they have to be there at that particular point, like they're getting them checked into a hotel and they need to work through documents or Social Security office, that many times they have to be with them. Otherwise, they give out a lot of thousands of bus passes a year to be able to do those type of things. So often it's in that situation. Do we transport just for the sake of transport? You get bus passes then.
I do see a lot of bills in the bills for cab rides and stuff.
I'm still in favor of going forward.
Inefficient.
But if they have to be there for the appointment anyway, then the staff's driving there, and then you're paying for the drive too. Staff's driving.
We'll have to agree to disagree.
That's okay, we can.
Okay, so in
Okay.
summary, then we will take this $15,000 out of the human services budget, and we'll add $34,000 in the commission budget.
Yep.
And remove the 25,000 for equalization.
Yes.
And, well, I think I understand, I know the answer to this question. I just want to make sure that we are using both of those vehicles in the commission that we need them.
And if I
Commissioner
could pitch
Karski.
in, yeah, I know that when those vehicles are sitting there, they're not sitting there, that equalization has used them, and so have other departments. So, I mean, we do need a dependable vehicle that's less than 15 years old and 150,000 miles to get to Pier and Yankton and wherever else our staff needs to go during the winter months. So it makes sense to have a vehicle in that.
Going to Pier can be scary.
All right, anything else on vehicles?
Are we waiting with highway till later?
We're on this slide. If you want to talk about highway now, I think that is fine.
Okay, we'll talk about highway now. So I gave each of you 4 sheets, which are in front of you somewhere. And these are because highway didn't understand that they were supposed to have the maintenance schedules in with their
Well,
vehicle requests.
According to highway, and I didn't dig too deeply, but to be fair to them, they said that these were not asked for in the budget package this year. So that is why they were not provided, not because they were not asked for,
Yeah.
so.
And I checked with Carol. I think it's just a misunderstanding, but it's fine, because
Okay.
I did ask for them, and they sent them to me. One of these, and I'll figure out which is which, because I'll have to go to my phone. One of them is for the SUV. The other one is for the pickup road crew. And my comment is that they don't need to replace either of these. The maintenance on these is minimal. The one that says exhaust system is the Silverado, or is the pickup? Is the pickup, I'm pretty sure. I'd have to go back up. And the only thing that it's had that's extremely, was their high cost on there was their exhaust system work, which the parts on that were $72, $73. I'm not quite sure what they did for labor, because an exhaust, you can do a complete overhaul on a semi in frame in less than 45 hours. So I don't know what you do on a pickup for 45 hours to fix it, but I mean, that's what it is. My comment is that most of the stuff on their maintenance schedules on both of those vehicles is routine maintenance. It's tires, it's oil changes, and I think they can get by with another year for these. One of them is used for road crew, and the other one is an administration pickup SUV, and I think that they can wait on both of them.
Do you know which is which, Cindy?
I'll look it up on my phone, because he sent them to me in messages and then, or in emails.
If I may ask a question.
Commissioner Karski.
I'm no longer the liaison to the highway department. You are Commissioner Bender. Have these been put through you? Not to put you on the spot or
Yeah,
anything.
I mean,
but-
we went through and talked about all the budget, but I didn't ask for maintenance records, so yeah.
But the need to change or to replace vehicles in general, I mean, how much conversation did you and DJ have?
I would say we spent most of the time on his other budget and less time on vehicles. But that would not be DJ's fault, that would probably be more my fault, so.
That's fine. Okay.
The Silverado is 0324. So that is the one with the exhaust system. The other one is the Jeep, which is 0208.
So this 0324 is the SUV admin building, admin?
Let's see what it says on this one. To go back to the other page on this one. That one is sale thing on here. Highway, it says just request, replace, it just says replace a Chevy Silverado. It doesn't say which one this is on his request for a new. On request for new, it just says the price is $36,390. So he doesn't, I don't know which one is which on these two, because it doesn't say on this request form where it's going to, other than going to the highway department. I'll look on the Jeep. The Jeep is a Jeep Grand Cherokee. And it also just says it's going to the highway department. And if you can look in his narratives for his comments on those vehicles if you want to. I just didn't have the maintenance schedule, so I asked him to pull them.
Okay.
One thought I had, if I could add a comment, possibly we would want to consider replacing the admin SUV and do a transfer of equipment from the highway fund to the commission office in place of purchasing a new SUV. You know, we just talked about
That would take
Purchasing a new
35
vehicle.
grand out of the general fund and put it on
Good
the,
idea.
I don't know why we would do it.
You'd still pay the general fund to the highway fund what the book value is,
Mm.
so it would cost you
it'd be,
28 to 30,000.
Yeah.
You're actually eliminating one of the vehicles by transferring it to a more high-use, high-mileage trip, if you will, rather than driving it back and forth from home to job site, which makes more sense to me. I
Makes
don't-
more sense to transfer the vehicle.
I don't think we need that many SUV administrative vehicles, frankly.
And so then just eliminate that vehicle completely on the highway side and just transfer the vehicle to the commission, is that what you're saying? I'd support that.
I
So,
think we need to readdress the whole transportation of vehicles and use to home for whatever kind of emergencies happen in that department. But that's probably not a conversation for right now. The policy needs to be fine-tuned. Excuse me.
I know we had talked about looking at that in the past, so,
Mhm.
so we'll keep that on our to-do list here. I'm okay looking at this with holding off on the SUV and the road crew truck. You know, the only issue that we have is as we put things off, then we might end up with a big chunk of cars that we have to do or at one time. But I'm okay if we don't do them this year. I was honestly trying to look through this documentation, so I might have lost the train of thought about transferring a vehicle from highway to the commission, so I might need someone to bring me back up to speed.
well, the thought was that we would approve the purchase of a new admin SUV with a transfer of the existing SUV, the one that's being replaced, move that to the commission office.
Or transfer the vehicle to the commission office and don't approve a highway administration, which is what Gerald said.
Okay.
But then the highway's down a whole vehicle?
If they're using it for transportation from their house to work, then why are we doing it?
Well, I don't think that that's the sole reason. I mean, I think that's a separate issue personally. I think they use them during their work days, And our policy currently allows some people to drive that vehicle and have it at home. And I think that there are some people where that makes sense because they might get called out in the middle of the night and need a vehicle. And I think there are some people that doesn't make sense. But I think that's a policy issue that we need to look at to try to figure out who should be driving their vehicles home, what kind of county marking should be on those vehicles, those kinds of things. But I think that's separate personally than this budget question. And I don't quite understand, so, I mean, I would not support eliminating a new vehicle and taking away their current vehicle so that they're hiking around or something, so.
I think it would be wise for all of us to have the opportunity to look at maintenance records rather than just automatically change it because of years of service. I never felt real comfortable with that. I still don't.
Okay, so we'll just make sure that that's very clear, that in the future when you ask for a vehicle request, you need to provide maintenance records to us.
I'd still be in favor of giving the commission office the new vehicle and then just making a decision about the highway one later, only because.
Well, I'm
why
confused.
would
We already gave the commission a new vehicle.
Yeah, well, Kim wanted to take that away and give them give the highway's old vehicle to the commission office and then buy the new vehicle for the highway fund.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm just saying, I think we should leave the commission office with the new vehicle
Okay.
and hold on the highway building, or the highway not getting a new vehicle.
And then we can vet out whether that vehicle actually needs to be an SUV or whether that second vehicle could be a smaller vehicle or something.
Madam Chair,
Sure, Barth.
I'm going to reminisce about the old days. Our previous superintendent would budget $850,000 for new equipment and spend $35,000 on new equipment. And it was a way of, in my opinion, of hiding the money so that it wasn't budgeted, wasn't spent. I mean, it was budgeted but wasn't spent, and so he carried it over. And I just thought I'd throw that out as a word of warning.
I personally am struggling with the whole justification part of just gonna ask for a new vehicle. Maintenance records don't tell the whole story. I mean, yeah, it might be part of it. You look at the maintenance record for this 2010 Ford, and it had 63 hours of labor hours. It was out for a week and a half out of 52 weeks, but 45 of it was, as you said, for an exhaust system. I mean, it was laid up for a whole week for an exhaust system. So, I mean, just looking at that, I would say, well, you only had a day and a half of labor into this vehicle. I mean, out of the whole year, what's the problem? Why does it need to be replaced? I need a stronger justification than just, I'm gonna put it in my request. Send me some pictures. If it's falling apart, I wanna know. I mean, I need more than just, maintenance records. Send me a narrative, send me some pictures, tell me why. I mean, is the back passenger door coming open and somebody falling out of the vehicle? I mean, what's going on? Why do you need a new vehicle? So, I guess I'd like stronger justification for these things.
Commissioner Heiberger.
Just one more comment. So there's 4. There's the 2 tandem trucks, the loader, and the trailer. I don't have any maintenance. I don't know anything about those. And so I don't have a comment on those because I don't know.
And I would just say that it's, we said yesterday that if we needed additional information, we should ask for it. We've had this information for a while. It's kind of hard to sandbag people today.
Well,
and say things
I did ask for the loader information 2 days ago, and that hasn't happened, and that's not completely his fault. I called it a tractor because it's a John Deere, and he said I don't have a tractor, and so then I came back with the number, and he just hasn't been able to get it together for me, so.
June 30th is when we meet again?
Yeah, so we can ask for that information. So you're asking for maintenance information on the 2 tandem trucks and the loader. The crash attenuator trailer is a brand-new vehicle, yeah.
I don't
Or
care.
a brand-new piece of equipment.
Maybe somebody has comment on that, because I don't.
really feel it's difficult to have vehicles that are the nicest vehicles on the road through the economic times that everybody else in Minnehaha County is dealing with, to be honest with you. I just have spend that kind of money for vehicles and displaying it every day to show that the highway department or whomever's got that kind of revenue source is not a priority for me.
So what is our decision?
Well, my understanding, Cindy, is that you got the loader, just got a text that you got the loader information this morning, but we've been in meetings since then, so I think it makes sense that you wouldn't have had a chance to look at that yet, so. All right, so we will eliminate the SUV and the pickup road crew trucks, both of those for $70,000. Why don't we leave the if you're okay with this, leave the tandem truck, the loader, and the trailer for right now, with the idea that we could come back and revisit that after we get further information
Do
at our,
those come out of general fund?
No.
they come out of highway.
Highway fund.
That's why they're in
All
a
of them.
separate, all of them, yeah,
Okay, so it really won't impact,
our general fund
No.
at all.
It does not.
The attachment, since, DJ, since you're listing the attachment on the loader, all there is a requisition form that is in our packet. So if there was another attachment, it didn't come through, because I just have the requisition form on here. So I didn't get the other paper, didn't come through.
Okay. All right. Anything else on vehicles? All right, outside agencies is next up. Any thoughts on outside agencies?
can somebody tell me what, and forgive my ignorance, the Minnehaha Conservation District does with the money? And, yesterday we talked, a justification going from 2,000 to 20,000. What are we seeing there? I mean, we're just trying to make them to where they were whenever, but I don't know enough about the organization or the, what the money's going to, so.
Well, I think, that's just their attempt to try to get back in the game, but they have funding and, they plant trees, they work with landscaping, they work with farmers and others. I know that at the last meeting, they mentioned that they've planted 35 acres of trees this year, and they sell some of this stuff. They rent planters to, different organizations, and they plant grass and other stuff. So I'm not an advocate for 20 grand for them at this point, but it's probably not that much different than other organizations that want to get an increase.
Any other comments about outside agencies?
Madam Chair, you've got a plan on the ambulances. You're going to come back to us and tell us?
Yeah, I think for right now, we'll just leave the ambulances at the level that they're currently funded for 2020, and then we'll come back
Okay.
in August and talk about them specifically. Commissioner Heiberger?
The IVC housing, if we're looking at the 2020 approving and moving that forward without any requests, I don't know where that's at in the budget, and they had requested $6,000.
We've
Just
shifted from a contracted rate, annual rate, to a per diem, and that should allow us to drop that budget down to 6,000. So there would be
Savings.
a savings of $53,000
So do
from,
we need to say, we want that in there?
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Right.
So I'm assuming we need to put that $6,000 in there for IVCs.
Which, just to clarify, when you gave us the cash applied illustrations, that's what you were talking about in illustration two.
it is, yes.
And the Southeast Behavioral Mental Health Court, was that also put in there, or was that still for our discussion?
That's still for discussion.
Okay.
I would would make a recommendation that we move the request back to the 2020 approved amount with maybe with the only exceptions of the reductions. Excuse me. Which is the one from the IVC Housing Carroll Institute and Southeastern Behavioral Health's Mental Health Court. And then consider a small inflationary increase of 2% on those totals.
Okay. So you're suggesting we approve a 2% over current funding levels for 2021 with the exception of IVC, which we would put at the $6,000 level, and we would go ahead and add the mental health court for Southeast Behavioral Health.
Yep.
Just needed to read.
2% across the board, including, including ambulances.
Well, you could go ahead and put that in for ambulances right now, since
Yeah.
it's kind of a placeholder, yeah. Commissioner Karski and then Commissioner Heiberger.
21.6 for the Family Violence Project, does that come out of the registered deeds funds, or can you, anybody know anything more about that one?
I'm sorry, could you repeat
one?
that
Yeah.
question?
21,600 for
Lutheran Social Service Family Violence
LSS,
Project.
Family Violence Project. Is that a new one, or is that something being?
The request over and above what they would get from the domestic abuse fund.
Over and above?
Yes.
Okay.
My question would be about the 2%, Gerald. That isn't in the contracts. So are you talking animal control, CCOG, Swim Empire Fair, that they would get a 2%
Every one of them would
on this
get
list?
the same kind of
Okay.
increase with the reductions that go back to the 2020 number, so we'd probably save somewhere around $345,000.
Okay.
Carol.
Just a few things, because this is I call it a hodgepodge of different things that you've got. Animal control, the Southeastern is determined flat out by $1 per capita, so you wouldn't, I don't think you want to change that at all. Animal control is based upon a contract, so that contract comes in every year. CCOG has a formula also that is flat. Sioux Empire Fair Association, you can see what they've gone through and then asked on here. Some of these organizations did not ask for a decrease. Do you want to fund a 2% increase for those that did not ask for one?
No, I
So-
said the decreases were coming out of the 2020 approved. So, for example, the IVC housing, the $59,055 would be reduced to the $6,000. And the Southeastern Behavioral Health Care one, I wouldn't put that in at this point.
I think what Carol's asking is, she's asking a different question. She's asking, if the agency has not requested an increase at all, you know, for example, the agribusiness division did not ask for an increase for
Or forward Sioux
2021.
Falls.
Yeah, there's several of those. Do we still want to give them an increase? I think Carol mentioned several things, but that might have been the most recent.
Stated that wrong. If I'm not interested at this point in giving those increases unless they had a reason for it, I was more interested in the ones who asked for a significant increase
Okay.
to only make it the 2% based on the 2020 approved budget.
No, I can go along with that. I'm understanding.
Okay. And just so maybe, I think the most important thing is that Kim and Vicky understand that. Do you guys understand
Probably
what
made
they're
it more
saying?
complicated than you want it.
Oh, it won't be nearly that much.
No.
Because if you look at the 2020 approved is almost 800,000.
Right,
So 2% across the board would only be $4,000.
right.
And we're not gonna give 2% across the board because we're
Everybody.
not gonna give it to Southeast, which is 170,000 of that.
Right.
I'd throw $2,000 on the list for that. For a 2%.
After you guys, you know, actually flow it through, you could
I mean, but does that
distribute it
seem-
to us. I think that's the ballpark, the
2%
numbers we're
across
talking
the
about,
board
yeah.
is 4,000, so half that.
Do it and,
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, it's going to be less than that, because if you take that almost $800,000 and reduce that by the IVC housing by 53,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then add the inflationary cost, and frankly, we're just holding this at this point anyhow, so I'm not interested in going through
Right.
Good.
Understood.
and micromanaging it, unfortunately.
All right, everybody comfortable with that
So
approach?
comfortable.
Okay. So the last two are payroll accrual and matrix adjustment. Carrie went over that a little bit. The payroll accrual, Carrie, look at me, make sure I'm talking about this right, is the 2%.
That's the 750,000.
The 750,000. So that is, we have talked about that a little bit. And, I mean, I'm in favor of doing that. I think that makes.
And I was teasing mainly, but I can go along with it too.
I think the way I look at it, which is weird, but because we've had an increase in cash reserves from last year to this year, I think we can increase our cash applied number by the same number and add it to the 8% and still feel comfortable in balancing a budget and only having to worry about the cash flow next year rather than this year.
With one caveat, I would mention, you asked about supplements, and recall that we did do almost $800,000 of budget supplements for carryover items from 2019 to 2020. So although we entered the year with a $2 million increase to our cash reserves, we carried $800,000 of supplements over. So if you net those, that's an increase of cash of 1.2 million.
Right. Is that for just the general fund?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that makes sense.
Yes, Commissioner Barth.
Kim, would some of that accrual money come out of the highway fund in as much as they're in our payroll also?
I would ballpark that to be about 50,000 of the 750.
Baby.
Good, thank you. Okay, thank you. All right.
Thought about it already.
Anybody, so everybody seems to be in favor of that. And then the last item is the matrix adjustment. 2%, Carrie? Yeah. That's what's built in right now, which was what was negotiated in union contracts for a number of our employees for this year. Anybody have concerns at that level? Okay. So then it's back to Kim's show. It's the updated review of means of finance.
Vicky's got all the calculations going.
We're adjusting appropriations by $789,495, which brings our budget surplus to $199,760.
I didn't catch any of that, sorry.
So we added one,
Appropriations adjustments of $789,495.
we added about $790,000 to appropriations.
Okay.
Brought our cash applied to 5.2 million, which means there's another potential 200,000 if we were to budget at the full 8%. Our current cash applied is at less than 8% at 5.2 million.
Sounds prudent.
Sounds like you guys did a good job. Commissioner Heiberger.
I just want to raise a different question if we're
Okay.
done with this. So I just was going through the rural metro stuff again yesterday. What do we have for cash reserve percentage? What's our average? I mean, because they're asking for 26, 25, 23. I'm just wondering what we run with, and I'm wondering why they think that they have to have such a high cash reserve. And I know we probably can't answer those questions, but what do we run with for a cash reserve?
Our cash reserve, at its lowest point, is about 7.5 weeks of operating expenses.
So,
As a percent, what would 7.5 divided by 52 be? And that's at the lowest point of the year,
right,
about 14%.
okay, Okay, so my question, I'm just raising a question, and you can think about this, you can talk about this. If we're running anywhere from, 14 is our low, and obviously that fluctuates a lot for us, did they really have to run at 26? Because in order for them to get to that 26, 25, 23, we're giving them a whole bunch more cash. And so,
Can you back up? Who are you talking about? What slide are we on?
the Metro 911
Oh, okay, I'm
presentation.
sorry. I
Yeah,
was
that's
like,
okay.
where are we exactly?
I'm sorry.
County admin building.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
So it just something to think about, because, I mean, they have asked us to increase the amount of money that we give to them, and it is a significant amount, and his justification yesterday was to get that cash revenue up higher to that 25, area. And I'm just saying, as a county, we don't ever run that high, and we're giving them cash for them to hold an account. I don't know what they do. I mean, is there a reason they have to have 25%? Because we're the ones that fund them. If they had a catastrophic event, we'd have to be there to pick them up off the ground, but do they have to have a savings account to hold that money when we don't even ourselves have a savings account?
Right.
And so I would just
There-
appreciate if you look at it, and maybe it's a question I just need to call and ask Scott, because I don't understand.
Commissioner Karski.
25% would be like a 3-month cash reserve, 3 months of operating expenses.
If I may, and I've been on this board off and on over the last 4 years, and their cash reserves were actually, at one point, I believe, over 40%. I mean, they were extremely high. They've been, the Metro Management Board has been directing them and guiding them in spending down their cash. And they are, in the next 5 years, trying to get it down to less than 20% just based on their spending. So we're not funding them to keep their cash there. We're actually funding them so they don't fall below it, below a reasonable amount. And their cash reserves, I mean, we're talking $500,000. I mean, even if they got it down to 15%, we're talking $40,000. I mean, we're not talking a large sum of money if we're to reduce their cash reserves. My suggestion is, we have a Metro Communications, or Metro Management Council board that works with that organization, and to let them do what they do to make it work. I mean, if we want to ask them to spend it down to 15% or whatever, I guess that's our prerogative, but based on what they're doing and the track that they're heading on, they're gonna be there, and they're gonna be there quick, so.
And I agree with you, they're down to 19 in about 5 years, but then why are we giving these increased fundings to keep them at the 26, 25, 23? I mean, if we gave them an extra, less $40,000, and maybe that's not what it would be.
And
but-
actually, yeah, and our
so-
percentage given to them is only,
25%.
yeah, of their total need. So, I mean, yeah, it might save us $15,000 or whatever to get them there quicker, but I don't know what position we'd be putting them in, and that'd be a question I'd want to ask ONA and have them, because they have their, is it ONA or ANA? ANA. Yeah, they have their projections on their stuff, but I mean, we can ask them to spend their money down quicker, I guess would be the only.
I'm just wondering why they have a reserve, because I don't know, but maybe that's a question for Scott, and I just thought it was a question that we all needed to at least think about.
Scott said yesterday they had a large reserve because they were expected to buy new radios.
Right.
Yep.
The state,
And that explains it.
and that the state ended up buying for them, which saved them money, which, yeah, so they've been tasked with spending down their reserves since at least 2016 that I'm aware of, so.
Okay.
Karski, we're having trouble picking up your audio. Can you far away from the mic?
I'm sorry. I'll speak closer.
Madam Chair?
Thank you.
Commissioner
I've
Barth.
been fortunate enough to have been on the Metro Communications Board, and, that's taken very seriously by everybody that's on that board. And it is a joint venture with us and the city, and slightly with Brandon. If we make a cut to their funding, that's mirrored by the city, which normally kicks in 3 times as much as we do. So it would be, our cut would mean a much larger cut to that organization. And I have not seen them go out of their way to buy extra pickup trucks or anything. And I think that we should rely on the good work that those members of that board do, along with the city council and the mayor, and fund them at the level requested, which was requested by the board, not by Scott alone.
I appreciate it, because I haven't been on 911 at all, so rely on you guys' opinions.
And you might have said this at the beginning when I was trying to catch up with where we were, but Scott did say yesterday their goal is a 15% cash reserve, that the goal is to spend it down. That is one of the notes I had taken yesterday, but he's really easy to talk to, so I think that you could reach out to him and he'd be happy. We've met with him a couple of times, and I was pleased with the level of detail he was able to provide yesterday and the work that he's done on budgeting, so. All right, Kim, did you have something else? Anything else?
I do not.
All right, well, I think that, if you guys have no other things that are pressing on your mind right now, we'll hear from Carol, and then we'll have an opportunity for public input.
Just as wrap up, the one thing we did include in the budget is liability insurance increased to $2 million. I didn't hear much discussion on that. We will go ahead and work through that process. I know Commissioner Karski asked us to look at an umbrella versus the increasing that to $2 million. We'll go ahead and continue to work through that, but leave dollars in the budget for that. When we meet again on the 30th, 3 things that I know we have to talk about are elected official salaries, highway vehicles we'll come back to, and then Carl, we had sent him a note following about those court reimbursements. He was not able to join us today, needed to do some research, so he will come back in 2 weeks.
I don't know that we need to revisit it necessarily, but I think it would be helpful that you visit with Erin and just be able to report out that you were comfortable after visiting with her about the MacArthur grant funding, that the way we have it booked is not going to cause problems in their application.
I think we've moved some good conversation. And I would say if the 5 of you thought you had vocal conversation, you should see the 3 of us before we even get to this point about the conversation about how this all works. The one thing I just will point out, though, is that because Kim does have in there the MacArthur money being funded, a lot of that money goes into the contract with USD for Erin's position and those other positions. So if that contract goes away, that money gets pulled out also as an expense.
All right.
Thank you.
I just thought of one more thing.
Heiberger.
There's be equipment as far as computers and stuff for the staff that we had in the state's attorney's office, because I know that was in her request, so that's something else you should look at. So. Office supplies.
Anything else? All right, opportunity for public input. Anybody here for public input?
If needed, I could make some comments.
We'll save those for after the meeting, okay. All right, I would say that I would adjourn. I'll just entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you for your
Motion
help.
and a second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you to you guys. You guys make
Yeah,
this
you guys are amazing.
Doable.
amazingly
Rock stars.
doable, yeah.
Many years ago, we spent